Thank you very much, fellow Africans, and welcome to our today's episode of the Change for African campaign. And being on Wednesday, it is about the resources that we own in Africa. And to help us exemplify on our today's episode, as we already discussed before and agreed that this week could be using the Africa Agenda 2063, the Africa we want to help us go through our this week's episode. This is in the sense that they will help us to realize or to understand just if we are making progress as a continent in terms of the aspirations that we are putting forward to be able to achieve them in a span of time. And so today, being on Wednesday, we'll be using the aspiration number one, which is kind of like related to resources in Africa. The aspiration number one of the Africa Agenda 2063 that was adopted in 2015 by the heads of state, by the African Union, and so this will help us to exemplify today's episode. And so their first aspiration is, or the aspiration number one. Remember yesterday we used aspiration number 6, and on Monday we had used aspiration number 3. So today we'll be using aspiration number 1, which is kind of like related to resources that we own in Africa, or to our pillar number 3 of the Change for African campaign. And so welcome, fellow Africans. The aspiration number 1 is whereby they say that they want a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development, whereby we have industrialization, agriculture, value addition, climate resilience, and sustainable resource management. So we have seen the word resource management in there. That is why we are using that one to help us exemplify our today's episode, and also being the third pillar about resources in Africa. Indeed, we have immense resources, that is for the fact, and we just own almost everything in Africa, and so that's it. And so a fellow African, speaking about resources and being able to have a prosperous Africa, indeed resources is one of the very key things that continents and countries need to be able to prosper, in terms of industrialization, as they have said, agriculture, value addition, climate resilience, sustainable resource management. So what is sustainable resource management? This is a way that we also need to define that, like what does it mean to be sustainable, or to have that sustainable resource management, and are we really doing that in Africa? Because indeed we have a diverse of resources in Africa, and so if we are yet to really understand what it means and how we can utilize our resources to make sure that we have a prosperous Africa, then we still have a lot to do. Because it is true that in Africa still, 10 years down the line since this was adopted in 2015, still we have the barrels of gun going on in DRC, in Eastern DRC. We have barrels of gun going on in Sudan, in Darfur. Going to know the reason behind all this, what they are fighting for is resources. We are having conflicts because of resources. People are fighting because of the immense resources in these regions in Africa. And so we see that indeed our resources do mean a lot to very many parts of the world, because it is for a fact that even these parties that are fighting, along these regions, these are not only Africans, but we have foreign bodies being part of this. So indeed we see the impact that the African resources have in this continent, and if we continue to have that sense of not being able to see the very right way to utilize our resources, then our resources remains to be a curse instead of being a blessing, of course, to us, because we do have a lot of them. But then that structure in which we can have our resources utilized, we can have our resources mined in Africa, and then our resources are refined in Africa, and if it's to manufacture devices or to manufacture components from these resources, it is from our own resources mined here in Africa, refined in Africa, and be able to be used in our industries in Africa. That is why they have the industrialization, because once the resources are once we have that sustainable management of our resources, then it means now we have now a right channel whereby after our resources have been mined, directly we have the industries, the infrastructure that is able to support our resources in Africa. And so it is still a question of whether we are there, because for a fact we still export most of resources raw as they are. After they've been mined, we export them. And actually people mining these resources in most of these African countries, these are foreign countries, of course, And so we still have a very big game to play in terms of seeing how our resources can be of importance to us. Countries come, mine our resources, export them to their countries, and then they manufacture devices and then come back to sell for us. I've always used the example of DRC and its cobalt. Over 70% of the it holds over 70% of the global supply of cobalt. But then, who is the main player in this industry of cobalt in DRC? It is China. China really benefits from resources from DRC, the cobalt, and this cobalt is whereby it's a very important mineral whereby it's manufactures in the industry of technology. Cobalt manufactures the devices we are using today. They go manufacture. China has become an industry of the world, and they go manufacture and bring them back to us from our own resources, as if we do not really know the source of these components that we get. And so it is time for Africa to reschedule the way it puts on its aspirations. When you put up aspirations, you also need to put up structures on how to achieve these aspirations. We also have to put up structures on how to make sure that we meet, we are able to deliver on what we say. Let us not just have paperwork and then have things written over years, and then this time will come to pass, and the way things are, we still have we still have very much to do than what we have done. So it is still a question of whether we'll be able to achieve this, because currently still there's a big problem in Africa in terms of being able to reach this, and sustainable management of our resources, being just able to rely on ourselves, mine our own things, put up the requisite infrastructure to be able to process these resources, make them of help in Africa before even let us have it in a way that we are able to manufacture and then have finished products and then export to other countries, instead of us they come take the key things, which are the minerals and the resources we have in Africa. When you speak about resources, I'm speaking about minerals. We have the human resource, but of which we spoke about yesterday, and the potential. But then here today, we're mostly focusing on our minerals, which we have a lot of them in Africa. We hold a very huge percentage of the global minerals, and we have to figure out ways in which we can utilize these resources and make them for help for the African continent. Albeit still. This remains to be a mere dream, because we are yet to be there. Regions that have very many resources, Eastern DRC, we continue. This is an epitome example of what really resources mean to Africa. This region, there is no peace in this region. This region, we have conflicts here. We have those people, we have those people are trying to benefit within that war, that is in Eastern DRC. So we still have to reorganize and reschedule the way we do our things. And so therefore, fellow Africans, thank you very much. That was about our resources in Africa, and let's come to Faces tomorrow as we speak about our fourth episode or our fourth pillar of the Change for African campaign, which is about the living standard that our people are living in Africa. And have an interesting afternoon. God bless you. Bye.